What is up, gang? Today is day 18 of Press Record 30, and today I want to return to a book I talk about often, and it is Dante's Inferno. In part, this is inspired by the fact that tomorrow begins a course with the Symbolic World guys, Richard Rowland, Jonathan Pajot, teaching, starting to teach the Inferno. Eventually, they plan to do the Purgatory and Paradise also, but they're starting with Inferno, obviously. I took a Beowulf course with those two last year, and it was a way for me to get somebody else's perspective on the story. I wrote about Beowulf in my second book, In a History of Hero. He was one of the heroes that I profiled, so it was very interesting to, given Richard's massive intellectual storehouse when it comes to sort of ancient, medieval, and then obviously in Beowulf, it's sort of like the Scandinavian Norse world. There's just a lot of really cool insights, and the symbolism that runs throughout the stories is where Jonathan sort of comes in and adds value in a way that's hard to get anywhere else. He sees things that are easy to miss, sort of pulls them together and finds common themes, and in a way that's super insightful. As somebody personally interested and trying to step more into education, specifically education on what can be called the classics or classic literature, thinking about the texts of Plato that we've talked about, or Aristotle that we've talked about, and Dante works into that mix a great deal also, and Homer, Iliad, and Odyssey. Knowing that education on those texts is what I want to be doing more and more of. I took my own attempt at, I taught Dante's Inferno to a group of about 10 people last year. I chose to use the Anthony Eslin translation for Richard and Jonathan's class. We are doing the John, I don't know if it's Chiardi or Chiardi edition. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to continue to build out my outline, to refine my outline. Eventually, I anticipate teaching Dante's Inferno again, and we'll teach Purgatory, and we'll teach Paradise, along with many other books, to try to deliver, do the best I can. One of my missions is to give people seeking who desire a classical education that didn't have the opportunity in school, wanting to give them a resource and make a library available where they can learn about all of these stories, where they can give themselves, if they have the interest and desire, something like the classical education that I got a little bit of an introduction to it in law school, but in sort of my upbringing and in public school, I feel like a lot of what's considered classical education is no longer in sort of the lower tiers in elementary, middle, and high school. And so what I'm trying to do, and with the advent of technology, I'm trying to, instead of just continuing to critique the education system, trying to do my best to create a solution and fill a gap and a need where I see sort of the lack of education on classical books, texts, ways of thinking. I see there being a gap there. Anyway, today I wanted to revisit one of my favorite scenes from Dante's Inferno. I've been told we're going to go through the first 8 cantos in tomorrow's class. So, working my way through it in this new translation. I've never read this translation. In the first canto, it's the iconic scene, the very first lines, when Dante wakes up midway along life's journey because he's lost. He'd wandered from the straight and true. You could describe this as Dante sort of falling prey to worldliness and what is the medieval sin of sloth, which is a disregard or apathy towards spiritual growth and spiritual matters. And so people think that Dante's around 33 when this happens. Some people will call it midlife crisis. Some people will call it dark night of the soul. But sort of all of the Divine Comedy is Dante's finding himself and his spirit in something like a dark night of the soul, and he writes himself back home, back up to paradise, in the comedy. So we have Dante the poet and we have Dante the pilgrim, and so it's this very unique look at a particular person's journey. But we also realize Dante's journey is one that all of us make in our own sense. The medieval world, the medieval cosmos, was ordered. And so what we see in the whole of Dante's comedy is his best attempt at ordering himself and ordering his life aligned with what he sort of sees as the highest and the aim, which is blessedness. But in the first canto, when he finds himself lost in a dark forest, that's iconic. Everybody's very familiar with that scene. The scene I want to talk about comes in Canto II. Every time I read Dante's Inferno, and this will be my fourth time through it, the book, this scene sticks out to me. And this is after Virgil has appeared to Dante and has saved him from the three beasts that confronted him in Canto I. And Virgil is explaining to Dante here what they have to do and who sent him. Who sent Virgil to be Dante's guide out of the dark forest. And so we start with Dante has doubts. He is learning sort of this journey that he has to go on, that Virgil has come to save him. But his first question is to doubt that he has the ability or that he is worthy. And the reason I think that I love this scene so much is because I see so much of myself and so much of my friends and the people I care about in terms of the initial reaction being one of unworthiness and self-doubt, and how eventually and how often that eats away our attempts at a glorious enterprise. That is effectively what this scene means to me. And so in watching Dante struggle with it and eventually overcome it, it's always very encouraging. It sort of re-anchors me with a little bit of purpose. And you'll see what I mean as we just walk through Canto II. So this is lines 31. But I, how should I dare? By whose permission? I am not Aeneas. I am not Paul. Who could believe me worthy of the vision? How then may I presume to this high quest and not fear my own brashness? You are wise and will not grasp what my poor words can but suggest. As one who unwills what he wills will stay strong purposes with feeble second thoughts until he spells all his first zeal away. So I hung back and balked on that dim coast till thinking had worn out my enterprise. So stout at starting and so early lost. So what Dante is talking about here is also what C.S. Lewis talks about when he describes something like the valley of disappointment. That there comes a part in every adventure and every journey where initial enthusiasm gives way to doubts and fears, and the true cost of making the journey makes you question whether it's worth it in the first place. Dante is having those doubts here. This is also characterized sometimes as capital R resistance, is what Pressfield would call it. This is Virgil's response to Dante's doubts. I understand from your words and the look in your eyes that shadow of magnificence answered me. So he's saying, Virgil's a shadow of magnificence that says, I understand from your words and your look in your eyes, your soul is sunken in that cowardice that bears down many men turning their course and resolution by imagined perils, as his own shadow turns the frightened horse. This reminds us of Seneca's line that we suffer more in imagination than reality. What Virgil is telling Dante here is, how can you defeat your journey before you've even began? You found yourself defeated by imagined monsters. There are going to be plenty of real ones along the way, but don't let yourself be defeated by the ones that are in your mind, the ones you anticipate being there, imagining yourself not having the strength when you meet them to overcome them. Virgil is trying to drum up some courage in Dante to make this journey. Now, Dante still needs a little convincing. And so What Virgil then goes on to tell Dante is that specifically there was 3 women, including Beatrice, who Dante is the subject of Dante's love and affection, who came to Virgil and asked Virgil to go to Dante and help save him. This is what Virgil says. There's a lady in heaven so concerned for him I send to you, that for her sake the strict decree is... Sorry, this is what's being told to Virgil before he goes to Dante. There's a lady in heaven so concerned for him, meaning Dante, I send to you that for her sake the strict decree is broken. She has turned and called Lucia to her wish and mercy, saying, Thy faithful one is sorely pressed. In his distresses I commend to thee. So what's happening here is Virgil in Dante's cosmos is actually stuck in limbo. So he can't go to purgatory, and he can't go through the rest of hell. He's stuck in a place called limbo, because limbo sort of represents the best of where reason can take you without the revelation of God. So the decree that is being broken, that souls stay where they are allotted after death, that's when he says the strict decree is broken. So they're saying there's somebody, a lady in heaven so concerned for him that for her sake the strict decree is broken. Lucia is known as sort of the lady of the light. Luce or lux means light in Latin. So Lucia is sort of lady of sight and of the light. So when we're saying thy faithful one is sorely pressed, Dante's as an author and a poet is something has sort of far seeing in his ability to and in terms of like seeing back. That is what poets and philosophers do. So here we learn that somebody's so concerned with Dante that they're sending Virgil to save him. And now this is Virgil. So he tells them that there are basically these ladies in heaven that care so much about him that they want to steer him right. And so Virgil says, and now what ails you? Why do you lag? Why this heartsick hesitation and pale fright? When 3 such blessed ladies lean from heaven in their concern for you and my own pledge of the great good that awaits you, of the great good that waits you has been given. As flowerlets drooped and puckered in the night, turned up to the returning sun and spread their petals wide on its new warmth and light, just so my wilted spirits rose again, and such a heat of zeal surged through my veins that I was born anew. Thus I began. So finally here, Dante feels courage and enthusiasm and zeal rise up in him again to meet and defeat the resistance that initially met him on the beginning of this enterprise. And what does it is this image of 3 such blessed ladies leaning over heaven, looking down on Dante and cheering for him. I return to this over and over and over again because often when I am struggling in my own endeavors, in my efforts, sometimes I go back to this line in Virgil and I imagine that there are higher beings, a better self, some sort of divine spirit and energy that is looking over the stadium stairs in heaven, down on earth, seeing what I do with what I was giving, hoping, praying, wishing, pleading on my behalf that I grow upward toward the sun and become what I can become. I draw a lot of strength from that image whenever I, like Dante, am having doubts and fears. And so I wanted to share that as one of my favorite scenes today. I hope you found it interesting and valuable. Until next time, peace.